The room froze the second the words left his mouth. Not a cough, not a chair scrape, just silence so thick it felt like it pressed against the walls. "I'll pay you $1 million, the billionaire said, his voice smooth, almost lazy. "Be my son's mother for Christmas." The sentence landed like a slap. Clean, sharp, public. And in that moment, everyone understood something ugly had just happened, even if no one dared to name it. The dining hall was built to impress. Crystal chandeliers hung low like frozen tears, throwing light across marble floors that had never known dirt. Long windows framed the snow outside, perfect and untouched. This was a room where deals were made, where power sat comfortably. And right now, standing near the doorway with her coat still on, was a young black woman who did not belong to this world. At least, not according to everyone staring at her. She had come for 5 minutes. Just 5. Drop off paperwork. Get a signature. Leave quietly, the way she always did. She wasn't dressed for the room. Her coat was worn at the cuffs. Her shoes had seen too many winters. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the folder, not because she was weak, but because she knew what it meant to be visible in places like this. Seen, but never respected. The billionaire had been talking about business when his eyes drifted to her. At first, it was casual. A glance, then longer. Measuring. Calculating. The way men like him looked at things they planned to use. And when he spoke, he didn't lower his voice. He didn't ask for privacy. He didn't care who heard. Power rarely does. His son sat at the long table, shoulders tight, fingers clenched around his fork. The boy couldn't have been more than 10, maybe 11. Too young to hide discomfort, too old to miss it. His cheeks flushed as head slowly turned toward him, then toward her, then back again, like they were watching a tennis match of humiliation. He stared down at his plate, wishing the moment would disappear. For her, the world narrowed. Sound faded. Her chest tightened as if the air had been pulled out of the room. $1 million. The number echoed in her head, heavy and unreal. It wasn't just money. It was rent paid. Medical bills gone. Doors opened. A future that had always felt just out of reach suddenly dangled in front of her like bait. But it came wrapped in something sour. She felt eyes crawl over her. The guests, the staff. Some looked shocked. Some entertained. Some impressed, as if they were watching generosity in action. To them, this was a bold gesture. A rich man solving a problem the only way he knew how. Throwing money at it. To them, she was lucky. Chosen. Elevated. To her, it felt like being stripped in public. The billionaire leaned back in his chair, completely at ease. One arm draped over the armrest. A faint smile playing at the corner of his mouth. He was used to rooms bending toward him. He used to silence following his words. He used to people scrambling to accept whatever he offered. He didn't see a woman. He saw a solution. A temporary fix to a problem he didn't want to face directly. Loneliness had crept into his mansion quietly over the years. His wife gone, his schedule full. His son raised by tutors, staff, and screens. Christmas was coming, and with it, the cameras, the questions, the empty chairs. This offer wasn't kindness. It was convenience. Her fingers tightened around the folder. She thought of her mother, lying awake at night, pretending not to be sick so she wouldn't worry her daughter. She thought of eviction notices folded neatly in a drawer. She thought of how many times she had been told to be grateful for less. How many times survival had required swallowing pride. But still, something burned in her chest, because the way he said it mattered. The calm. The boredom. As if he were ordering a service. As if motherhood were a costume someone like her could put on and take off for a price. As if her body, her presence, her care were just another luxury he could afford. She looked at the boy again. He had finally lifted his head. Their eyes met for a second. His were wide, searching, not hopeful, just scared. Scared of being alone in a room full of people. Scared of being part of something that felt wrong, even to him. Betlick did something to her, grounded her, reminded her who she was before the world taught her to shrink. Billionaire waited. He expected gratitude, maybe tears, maybe a quick yes. Silence made him shift slightly in his seat. Power doesn't like waiting. It hates uncertainty. Every second she didn't respond chipped at the control he thought he had. She said nothing. The pause stretched long enough for discomfort to ripple through the room. Someone cleared their throat. A server froze mid-step. The chandeliers kept shining, unaware that something fragile was cracking beneath their light. In that silence, memories flooded her. Being talked over, being underestimated, being offered crumbs and told they were feasts. She had learned to survive by staying quiet, by accepting what was given, but this felt different. This felt like a line being drawn across her chest. The billionaire raised an eyebrow. "It's a generous offer," he said, his tone still smooth, but sharper now, a warning underneath. He wasn't used to resistance. Especially not from someone like her. She finally looked straight at him. Not down. Not away. Straight into his eyes. And what he saw there wasn't desperation. It wasn't greed. It wasn't fear. It was restraint. A quiet fire held back by years of discipline. A dignity that hadn't been broken, just bruised. A woman calculating not just what she needed, but what this would cost her soul. Her lips parted, then closed again. She inhaled slowly. The room leaned in, hungry for the answer. Yes would restore comfort. Yes would make this moment disappear under money and laughter. No would expose something no one wanted to examine. She still didn't speak. And in that suspended moment, something shifted. Not in her, in him. For the first time, the billionaire felt it. That faint, unsettling feeling that money might not solve this one so easily. That the woman standing by the door was not an object in his world, but a force he did not understand yet. Christmas was days away. The offer was on the table. The room held its breath, and the story had only just begun. The offer didn't die when the room went quiet. It grew. It slipped into hallways and kitchens, down staircases lined with portraits of men who had never been told no. It moved, like gossip, wrapped in gold. Staff leaned close to each other, voices low, eyes wide. Guests checked their phones, pretending not to stare while staring anyway. $1 million. Just like that. For Christmas? For pretending. For playing a part in a story the billionaire wanted to sell to the world. To him. It was clean. A deal with clear edges. He had money. She had a need. End of story. He had spent his whole life solving problems this way. Write a number. Watch resistance fade. People liked to call it generosity, but really, it was control with good manners. He sat back in his chair as the murmurs spread, certain the moment had already bent in his favor. To her. It felt like standing naked in a room full of dressed people. We could feel the judgment and the curiosity mixing in the air. Some faces held pity, others held envy. A few held that quiet smile people wear when they think someone else is being lifted out of their place. No one asked how it felt. No one asked if she wanted this kind of attention. They just watched, waiting to see if she would grab the rope that had been thrown down to her, even if it burned her hands on the way up. She swallowed and finally spoke. Her voice didn't shake. That surprised even her. What happens after Christmas? She asked. Not accusing, not pleading, just asking, like someone trying to see the full picture before stepping off a ledge. The billionaire barely paused. He shrugged, like the answer didn't deserve more thought than that. Leave, he said. Paid. Clean. Simple. Simple. The word hit her harder than the offer itself. Simple meant no mess. No feelings. No consequences. Simple meant he hadn't thought about the mornings after. The empty rooms. The child waking up and realizing the person who sat with him, laughed with him, made him feel seen, was gone. Simple meant pretending emotions were light switchers you could flip off when the contract ended. She glanced at the boy again. He wasn't looking at his plate anymore. He was looking at her. Watching. Per mouth. Per eyes. Like her answer would decide something bigger than money. His fingers twisted together in his lap. Small hands trying to hold on to calm. That look pressed against her chest until it hurt to breathe. She wanted to say no. The word was right there. Heavy but ready. She had practiced it her whole life. No to bad jobs. No to disrespect. No to people who thought they could touch her time and body and spirit without permission. But life had a way of wearing down even the strongest. Now her mind betrayed her, pulling up numbers instead of principles. Rent overdue again. A notice, folded and unfolded. So many times the paper was soft. Her mother's cough, getting worse. The way she smiled through it, pretending it was nothing. Dreams she had pushed back year after year, telling herself, someday, someday. Someday. The billionaire saw the flicker in her eyes and leaned forward. He mistook calculation for weakness. This changes your life, he said, quieter now, like he was doing her a favor by explaining something obvious. Don't be foolish. Foolish. As if dignity were childish. As if saying no to being bought was a mistake she couldn't afford. The imbalance between them was impossible to ignore. His suit fit perfectly, tailored to his body and his world. Her shoes were scuffed, practical, chosen for comfort over style. He spoke from a place of abundance. She stood in a space carved out by need. He had options. She had consequences. And the injustice of it all wasn't loud. It didn't shout. It smiled politely and waited. Around them. The room slowly relaxed, as if the outcome was already decided. People shifted back into their seats. Glasses clinked. Someone laughed a little too loudly. They assumed she would say yes. Everyone always did. That was how these stories usually went. The poor grateful, the rich generous, the world back in balance. Her silence stretched again, but this time it felt different. He felt it too. A slight tightening in his jaw. He didn't like waiting twice. I don't want to pretend, she said finally. The words surprised her as much as anyone. I don't want to hurt him. She nodded gently toward the boy. And I don't want to hurt myself. For a split second, something like annoyance crossed the billionaire's face. Hurt wasn't part of the equation. Pain was an abstract thing to him, something other people dealt with. It's just Christmas, he replied. People pretend all the time. That was true. People pretended to be happy. Pretended to be okay. Pretended not to feel small in rooms like this. But pretending always cost something. And the bill usually came later. The boy shifted in his seat. Dad, he said softly, unsure. The sound of his voice cut through the room, sharper than any argument. The billionaire didn't look at him. Not yet. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, long enough to feel the weight of every choice she had ever made, long enough to know that whatever she did next would follow her. Then she opened them and nodded once. Small, controlled, final. Okay, she said. The relief in the room was almost embarrassing, like everyone had been holding their breath and could finally exhale. The billionaire smiled, wide and satisfied. Victory without effort. Someone called for paperwork. A pen appeared like magic. The machinery of wealth moved fast when it needed to. They spread the documents across the table. Terms written in careful language, dates, conditions, no emotional involvement, no long-term expectations, no claims. Just a role, temporary, replaceable. She scanned the pages, aware of how calm her hands looked compared to how loud her heart felt when she signed her name. The pen pressed into the paper harder than necessary. Not from anger, from resolve. The billionaire took the papers, barely glancing at the signature. Deal done. Problem solved. He believed that was the end of it. He believed control had been secured. But something shifted the moment the ink dried. She didn't feel small as she didn't feel owned. She felt focused, clear. She hadn't agreed to disappear inside his fantasy. She had agreed to show up as herself. Fully, honestly. And that was something no contract could limit. The boy smiled at her then. Just a little. Hope, careful but real. And in that small smile, a crack appeared in the billionaire's perfect plan, because Show wasn't stepping into this as an actress, playing a part. She was stepping in as a human being. And humans don't follow scripts written by money. Not for long. Christmas morning arrived like a fragile whisper over the snow-blanketed city. The mansion sparkled under icicle lights. The crystal chandeliers refracted gold into every corner. And the air smelled faintly of pine, cinnamon, and the cold promise of winter. Cameras were set up at precise angles, capturing every polished surface, every shimmer of silverware. To anyone looking from the outside, it was perfection. The perfect home, the perfect decorations, the perfect family image, but at the center of it all, standing with quiet strength, was her. She wore no mask of performance, no forced smile, no borrowed warmth. She simply existed, calm, composed, unbought. From the moment she entered the grand hall, she had made one choice, to be herself. And that choice unsettled everything. The billionaire who had built his life on control, on purchase, on precision, felt the first prick of unease. His son watched her with something akin to relief in his eyes. A child, burdened by the cold architecture of wealth and distance, recognized care when it wasn't written in contracts. She remembered the little details. The boy's favorite storybooks lined the shelves. The way he flinched when his father's voice carried just a little too sharp. She noticed the trembling when he passed the grand hall mirrors. She noticed that even in a mansion of riches, children notice absence. And so she acted. Not the part she was paid to play, but the part he had never known he needed. She cooked the boy's favorite breakfast, letting him stir eggs while she laughed with him. She wrapped him in a warm scarf when the wind bit too hard, and she listened when he whispered fears no one else heard. The cameras flashed. Guests smiled politely. The billionaire assumed she was performing exactly as agreed. The illusion of familial warmth for the price of $1 million. But she had refused to be controlled by paper, by numbers, by the expectation of compliance. Days passed. Snow fell in slow, silent layers. And the boy changed. He smiled more openly, spoke more freely, even laughed in ways that startled the staff. He slept deeper. He asked for bedtime stories, not just from her, but alongside her, seeking the comfort of a presence he had never been offered. And then, in a quiet moment, when the world outside the room had fallen into the hush of night, he spoke a word that broke every contract and expectation. "Mom," he said. The word hung in the air, heavier than gold or diamonds. The room froze. Even the snow seemed to still. The billionaire felt something unfamiliar rise in his chest. Panic. Loss of control. This wasn't in the terms, this wasn't in the plan. He had calculated this entire arrangement, believed he could fill absence with money, assume affection through schedules and smiles that could be bought. But he had miscalculated the human heart. He cannot legislate love, cannot file a form to enforce care. Later, when the boy was asleep, the billionaire confronted her in the library. The grand room was silent, except for the crackle of the fire. His tailored suit cut sharp lines across his frame, but it could not protect him from the vulnerability creeping into his own heart. "You were paid to pretend," he said, voice low but brittle with frustration. His hands clenched the edge of the desk. "Pretend." This was a contract, a transaction, not whatever this is. She looked at him, eyes unwavering, calm, like the surface of water over a deep river. "I was paid to show up," she said softly. Pause, her voice barely louder than the fire's whisper. Yet it echoed louder than any chandelier. "No one ever paid you to do that." The sentence hit him harder than any insult could. It wasn't just that she refused to be bought. It was that she had reminded him of what he had never learned to give. Presence, attention, unconditional care. The realization was sharp and sudden, like a glass shattering in the silence. For the first time, the billionaire saw himself not as a man of power, but as a man who had built walls and filled the space between them with wealth instead of warmth. He had thought money could replace him. He had thought a check could teach love. He was wrong. The twist, the real reversal, wasn't about greed or desire. It wasn't about negotiating another deal or raising the stakes higher. The twist was that she had moved beyond it. She no longer wanted the money. The contract that once dictated her movements, her words, her smile, had become irrelevant. She had discovered something more valuable, her own agency, her ability to shape someone's world without being controlled herself. The billionaire realized. Too late that true influence cannot be purchased, only earned through honesty, care, and respect. Gotten the boy innocent, resilient, unaffected by contracts, had already learned the truth. He had tasted the warmth that money could never buy. He had called her mom without hesitation, and in doing so, revealed the human truth the billionaire had ignored for too long, that love is not a commodity. That connection cannot be written into clauses or dictated by wealth. The billionaire tried to speak, to reclaim some semblance of authority, but words felt hollow in the room filled with genuine affection. Every syllable fell flat, because she no longer needed approval. She no longer performed for him or anyone else. She had already claimed something that could not be signed, sold, or revoked. Dignity, presence, and unbought care. That night, he walked through the mansion, lights twinkling, halls silent, and he felt the weight of absence more than ever. Money could purchase decorations, parties, even smiles, but it could not buy the trust, the safety, the love of a child who finally felt seen. It could not replace what he had neglected, what he had overlooked in his pursuit of control. The realization was uncomfortable and bitter and necessary. He had been powerful in the wrong ways. She had been powerless only in his eyes, but truly, she had always had the power that mattered. And as the fire crackled and the snow pressed against the windows, the billionaire understood the moral lesson that had eluded him, that human worth cannot be measured in dollars, that control is an illusion, and that the smallest acts of care, the attentiveness, the listening, the presence hold more transformative power than all the riches in the world. In trying to buy love, he had forgotten to give it. In trying to control, he had forgotten to understand. And in that, the balance shifted. She had arrived as a woman who could be bought. She left as a woman who could not be controlled. And in that transformation, a family began to heal in ways no contract, no sum of money could ever ensure. The boy slept peacefully, her hands warm around his, and the billionaire sat quietly, watching, learning, unlearning. The mansion remained magnificent, glittering, polished, but the real magic was no longer in the decor, nor the cameras, nor the carefully arranged parties. It was in the simple, unspoken truth that humans cannot be owned, only respected. By the time Christmas morning faded into evening, the billionaire had learned a lesson no school or fortune could have taught him. That presence outweighs possession. That care outweighs contracts. And that love, true, unbought, patient love, is the most valuable gift of all. And she, the woman money could not control, had reminded him what it meant to truly show up, to truly see, and to let humanity, not wealth, define the measure of life. Christmas morning arrived with a fragile hush. Snow drifted lazily outside, settling on rooftops and bare branches, painting the world in quiet white. Inside the mansion, the usual clamor of servants preparing for a grand feast was muted. Something heavier, more tender, hung in the air. The billionaire, who had built his life on control and transactions, sat in the library, staring at the contract that had dictated the past weeks, a contract that promised money in exchange for pretending, for performance, for a semblance of family. He picked it up, turned it over, the paper crisp under his fingers, and then, quietly, almost ashamed, he tore it into pieces. No one saw. No one applauded. The chandeliers above refracted light, but for the first time, they did not glitter. For him, "I don't want you to leave," he admitted. The words were not an offer, not a bargaining chip, not a command dressed in civility. They were a confession, raw, vulnerable, unplanned. He had never spoken to anyone this way, not his colleagues, not his advisors, not even the reflection of himself in the mirror. And now he said it to hurt the woman who had refused to be bought, who had walked into his world like a quiet storm, reshaping everything she touched. She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes traced the familiar lines of the mansion. The ornaments glinted softly on the tree. The boy sat nearby, clutching a small gift. He had wrapped himself, oblivious to the tension that had always dominated these halls. The warmth of the room no longer came from marble or gold, no longer from polished silver or expensive linens. It came from presence, from care, from someone choosing to be there, fully, without calculation, without contracts. Her gaze fell on him, the boy, and then on the billionaire. And finally she spoke. "If I stay," she said slowly, deliberately, "it won't be because you paid me. It will be because you change." Her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of years of observation, of endurance, of witnessing the lonely corridors of power. Her words were not just a reply, they were a challenge, a mirror. And for the first time, the billionaire nodded, not in command, not as an act of authority, but in humility. He stepped back, and for the first time, he listened. Really listened. He listened as she spoke to the boy, asking about his dreams, his fears, the small things no one had ever asked. He listened as she guided him through a game, gentle but firm, teaching patience and empathy, without the push of money or the pull of authority. He sat at the table during breakfast, not behind a desk, not above but beside, learning, unlearning, learning that a child does not need wealth or commands to feel secure. A child needs attention, presence, love that cannot be purchased. The house began to change. The walls seemed softer, not from renovation but from laughter that was not forced, from conversations that were real, from someone finally noticing and responding to the child's existence. The staff, who had been used to witnessing transactions disguised as family, began to whisper differently. There was warmth in the air now, not calculated, not performative. The billionaire himself changed. He laughed differently, not the rehearsed chuckle of a man ensuring appearances. He stopped asking how things looked to the world outside and began asking how they felt inside. The $1 million, once a tool of control, was still on the table. She accepted it, but on her own terms, with boundaries, with dignity intact, with respect that had been earned, not offered. The world outside the media, the staff who had watched silently, the neighbors called it shocking, unbelievable, a miracle. They did not understand that the real miracle had never been the money. It had been the transformation of hearts, the quiet power of someone refusing to be owned, and the wealthiest man in the room learning to kneel before what truly mattered. Even the boy seemed to sense the difference. He did not ask about money or status. He asked for stories, for shared laughter, for moments where he was seen and heard. And in those moments, the billionaire understood that the contracts, the checks, the expensive gestures, they were nothing. Compared to this, nothing could buy the trust he saw reflected in the boy's eyes, the warmth radiating from someone who had not been bought, and the silent authority of love and presence that could not be sold. She taught him without speaking, as a teacher, without scolding as an authority. Her presence was a lesson in itself. The billionaire watched her guide, protect, and nurture, not for performance, not for recognition, not for money, but simply because it was right. And slowly, painfully, he recognized that power and wealth are hollow when divorced from humanity. They build walls, not homes. They buy silence, not respect. They buy appearances, not love. As the sun slanted through the windows, warming the room with soft light, he understood the ultimate truth. Dignity is never for sale. No sum of money can purchase it. No status can command it. And love, true love, only grows where power finally kneels, where humility replaces hubris, where attention becomes the currency instead of gold. In that quiet snow-draped morning, the billionaire saw his own failings laid bare. He saw the emptiness that wealth had never filled, the distance he had created, and the lesson he had long resisted. She stayed. Not because she had been paid, not because she had been persuaded, but because she had seen something in him that he had never seen in himself, the willingness to change. And in that, a family began to exist, where once there had only been transactions. They celebrated Christmas. In a way, money had never allowed. Messy, warm, imperfect, human, gifts were exchanged, laughter echoed, tears were shed. And in every moment, the lesson was clear, unavoidable, and painfully simple. The richest rooms, the grandest halls, the finest feasts, without presents, without care, without love, empty. And as she tucked the boy into bed that night, brushing a stray curl from his forehead, she looked at the billionaire. No judgment, no triumph, only a quiet, undeniable truth. The power he thought he wielded was nothing compared to the humanity she had shown. The house remained magnificent, glimmering with holiday lights, but the real magic had always been invisible. It was in care that could not be bought, in attention that could not be demanded, in love that could not be forced. The billionaire leaned against the doorway, watching. For once, he did not command. He did not dictate. He absorbed, and slowly, he began to understand that being rich is not measured by the money one holds, but by the hearts one touches and the humility one learns. The contract, the $1 million, the world's expectations, all of it became secondary. What mattered now was something older, deeper, and entirely human. Presence, respect, dignity, and the courage to kneel before what cannot be bought. Christmas ended not with fanfare, not with headlines, but with a quiet revelation that stretched into every corner of the mansion. She had shown up, refused to be purchased, and in doing so, transformed a home, a child, and a man. The billionaire had learned what no wealth could teach, no mentor could impart, and no title could command. That lesson was simple, yet profound. You can buy silence, you can buy appearances, but dignity is never for sale, and love only grows where power finally kneels. And so, in the quiet snow of the morning, with the lights dimmed and the house finally alive with genuine warmth, the richest man in the room learned that the greatest gifts are not purchased, not signed, not given for attention. They are earned through care, earned through presence, earned through humility. And she, the woman who could not be bought, had shown him the most valuable lesson of all.